Hi, and welcome to this very special interview today with a very dear human, someone whom I only got to meet this year and who deeply touched my heart and soul and came and walked country where I live and really showed me new ways to see the land on which I reside. And that is this beautiful human, Jandamarra. How are you, Jandamarra?
Beautiful. Thank you. Very honoured to be part of a lovely yarn with you, AJ.
I'm looking forward to it. And I want to take a moment, of course, and just acknowledge that I'm on Wonnarua and Darkinjung land and am incredibly honoured to have the opportunity to live on this beautiful piece of Mother Earth and to call her home and to be her custodian. And as you can see, Jandamarra is in a beautiful location. Tell us about the land you're on.
My girls and I, two little girls, 12 and 9, live up here on the Sunshine Coast on Kabi Kabi or Cubby Cubby country. And when I say that, obviously they're the traditional mob. And I've lived here for 32 years and have a beautiful relationship with this land here. And continually, always, I think, until my last breath, deep listening. So, yeah, it's our house. I've been here at this place here for 16 years. We
Mm.
have beautiful food forest and solar and rainwater and living as much of little footprint as possible, growing a lot of our own food, stepping towards those ways of the way that our grandparents, our great grandparents, and on all lands and all places have lived a lot more closer to their
Mm.
essential nourishment. So, yeah.
Oh, 100%. And I'm walking that way a bit myself, just starting to grow a bit more. Got a little orchard happening and some more permaculture and regenerating the rainforest and noticing how the land speaks to me in different ways. And I'll sometimes plant something and then I just feel like it's not right. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm like, you're not happy, are you? And I've got to dig it up and move it. And yeah, just starting to learn the ways of the land and how she wants to flow. So it's
Oh,
certainly beautiful to be connected.
and I love that you, as you shared with me, that you plant a tree or a plant a day, how just one little act can be so rippling within, obviously, community, a place. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I've been loving because birds are really important to me, and I had some advice from some horticulturalists around most of the trees and things that I had were for bigger birds and predator birds. And they said you need some smaller shrubs and you need some flowers and you need some spiky things that they can build their little nests and hide in. So
Yes.
over the past maybe 6 months, I've been making a real concerted effort and I'm watching out my window now, lots of little birds starting around. And so I'm hearing little finches and red robins and all sorts of things that little blue-faced birds that I never had before that have started
Oh,
coming around.
amazing. We have here what's considered a weed. I mean, I'm reconsidering what's actually a weed because a lot of weeds remineralize the soil. And one
Mm-hmm.
of them we have is lantana, and it takes over areas, but it's an absolute haven for those little birds, those little finches, those little minor, but the tiny ones that need to escape the predatory. And
Mm.
there's such a repopulation of those. I've seen people that have lawns and they don't have a lot of those birds. So it's
Yeah.
great, great to, even though it's considered a weed that does take over invasive, some things can kind of rebalance out in our in our ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And so, as well as talking a bit about our backyards and how much we love the land, I'd love to have a bit of a yarn around some of your story and how you came to be where you are. How I've met you. Obviously, you're in a phase where a season of art, and you've been doing that for a number of years, and your artworks are incredible and inspirational. And I'll be sure to put links in show notes that help people go and check out some of your creations. But I know you came to that in a way through your journey as a person walking this earth. And I'd be really delighted if you shared a little bit of your story of whatever you're comfortable and feel might be informative for some of the leaders and people who tune in here.
Yes. So I suppose I did art as a little tiny boy, obviously kindergarten and all of those things, and enjoyed it. But it never really had the true substance until later in life, around 16, well, it was 16 years old. I ran away from home at the age of 13 and lived on the streets, and due to a tumultuous journey of trying to walk in what I see as this Western construct, which you could call the matrix, and trying to navigate a world of, what is expected of you to jump on this, what seems this economic treadmill, which I don't see as a problem, but the whole throwing out of relationship and connection I really struggled with. So in living on the streets, I stole for food, living out there in the cold on my own a lot of that time. And I was locked in juvenile institutions and 14, 15, 16 years old. And so when I was 16, myself and four other Aboriginal inmates decided we'd have enough, being locked in an institution just outside of Toowoomba. And we broke out and we took off. For 3 days, we thought, we're free. We'll be so free. We'll live free. And we've escaped and we've gotten back our sense of sovereignty outside of being told when to go to the toilet, when to eat, when to sleep. Everything was so oppressed down. And there was a lot of, assault, abuses and things going on in there. So
Mm.
anyway, we were recaptured and put in what was known as the pound. And in the pound, they have the cells where there's no toilet, no bed, just 4 brick walls, a big steel door, a little tiny window, and a bucket to defecate in. So we were left in there for weeks. And for me, at first, I was, yelling and screaming, and after a while, smashing my head against the wall and stripping off naked and just wanting someone or something to connect with.
Mm.
And it broke my spirit down. I remember vividly, if I had any moments, if I had a rope or something, I would have taken my life, no problem. But what had actually happened is that it stopped all the distractions in my life that had distracted me from the deeper pain and anguish that I'd obviously been masking in my world through violence, through anger, through frustration, through this wanting to break away, this wanting to burn down the village, to feel
Mm.
warmth. And what it was underneath all these distractions with being with this deep sadness was an acknowledgement that there was a greater part of me that I couldn't shut down. I couldn't put so much armor over to hide away. So when I got out of that space 3 weeks later, I didn't talk for a while, and the people in charge were quite concerned. I don't know if it was for them or for media to find out.
Mm. Mm.
Young children were really traumatized. So they brought a counsellor in, and this lady counsellor introduced me to many different means, but one of them was a paintbrush. And I remembered some of the little bits of stories that my nan and that had shared, um, about growing up in a mission, on the mission, and our cultural ways, little bits, not only my nan, my mum, my uncles, my aunties, and I started to express my own little relationship with that in painting, in stories. And that for me started to acknowledge that part in me that was so expansive and allow as a catalyst for that to become a channel through my life that became an inner guidance that was once a seed, grew into a bush, into a shrub, into trees, and then into a forest that now is a way of living for me that is undeniable, that allows me to continually remember. Sometimes I forget, remember who I really am in this world and what my true essence of belonging is. So painting is much more than a paintbrush and paint and canvas, staples and wood, as it transcends those elements to identity, a deeper sense of knowing and a deeper sense of relating. A bit like I started to remember, yes, I'm a drop of the ocean, but I also remembered in that expansiveness that I am the ocean within a drop, and in that I am part of something greater and walk tall with all of this around me. So yeah, that was my introduction to a paintbrush, and from there has become a big part of my world in sharing now as I pass it 7 generations ahead with a lot of young people in creating murals and with visual narratives of belonging and connection and relationship.
And I've seen some of those murals and photos of them, and also I think the number of children and people you've had involved and just how that must touch their soul and the ripple effect. But I just want to go back to even the fact that they call it the pound just, really makes me shudder. And, I want to say sorry that you were put through that, as a teen, as a young man. And also, I think that breaking down of your spirit so young. And maybe now it's just dawned on me, even though I knew a bit of your story, why, when I meet you, I meet a wise man and an elder who has a spirit in him that's either been before or lived before or has lived really deeply and fully. I meet lots of people and it feels superficial. I feel like I just meet their facade. Whereas I remember the first time meeting you, I almost couldn't speak. I just had to stand and kind of take in your presence. And maybe that's because of what happened to you. Yeah, I'm just reflecting rather than asking a question, I realize, but I really kind of want other people to hear if they can sense that too. And I'm sure they are through your words. But such a young age to have big realizations like that.
Well, the realization for me didn't come till later in life, where I could not intellectualize it, but cellularly understand and it was almost like, removing the impact of that armor that I'd put around me to then see with much more clarity that anything that happens in our world happens for us as opposed to us. We're often brought up in this society to be the victim, and I, in no judgment on others, I get like you could look at that circumstance and say that's terrible, and I would never wish that upon anyone else. But that circumstance moved me in a way that I was able to see, if anything, it enveloped a deeper sense of empathy, a deeper sense of spaciousness, of acceptance, a deeper sense of acknowledging that even though I don't understand something, it can be okay. We're taught that something that is an obstacle, something that is a problem, is something to be avoided or maneuvered around. But often that problem or that situation is an invitation to deeper self-love and acceptance. True sovereignty, this word sovereignty, is not a controlling of the circumstance necessarily, but more of how we respond to that circumstance. Nelson Mandela, locked up for 30 years in a jail cell, maintained his sovereignty. So in this, we transcend those whatever situations to realize that we are always free. And that situation, those other 4 boys are all gone now. and I'm the only one that's left out of them. And I took different paths, none right, none wrong. But I saw that whatever comes my way and is something that's uncomfortable and takes me to those deep, is often bringing stuff to the surface to be felt, to be acknowledged, to allow, to clean out, to flow back into my body, my mind, my emotional field, to flow more like a river rather than live in that trauma. So it's been, as much as I say, it was a blessing. It was a blessing in unpleasant wrapping. So yes.
That's a nice way to put it. And I think I know, not in the same way, but my own relationship with being broken down came more around my 40s. And it really made me reflect that first half of my life was more entrapment in relationships, entrapment in the system, entrapment in jobs, in a way. And it wasn't until I broke free of all of that and started to experience freedom of your own choosing, and that I get to choose how I walk, forward from here, that you do start to realize none of it's being done to me. It is, all for my own good. And I get to choose how I respond to whatever that
Yes.
is.
And that's true freedom, right? Because we can't, I heard many beautiful people. Ram Dass once said, to try and control the world is to grab the iron out of the cupboard and try and flatten the surface of the ocean. And how crazy that can seem. But, when we can allow ourselves to meet life wherever it's at as a dance, we get to realize that the suffering is lessened not only on ourselves, but in the collective field that we are part of.
Absolutely. And many of the people I work with in organizations around their culture and their leadership, and especially with experienced leaders who are stepping into their eldership in an organization, are starting to realize that, intellectually we've come to believe all of this stuff we've been fed, and are beginning to question. And I always say, follow the money.
Yes.
Who's getting paid for this, or who benefits? And that sometimes then starts to teach you, well, of course they've got a certain narrative because that serves them to make more money, or whatever that might be.
Yes. And what is our true reference point? That internal radar that we're often, excuse me, we're often taught or indoctrinated to believe, to shut down, shut down, shut down. Listen to what you're being told. Listen to what the authorities tell us. I mean, authorities, bless them, they understand things in certain fields, but no one is more authority than our own being and our inner radar. And this guides us to what's right and what's true and what's something to be avoided. And often this is so hidden away or squashed down or locked away in a room somewhere that we no longer see it or hear it. And often those that are telling us what to do, often there's agenda or a narrative or there's profit to be made. So it often leaves us to realize, how do we really navigate the world? Do we continually look for someone else to guide us, or is the inner guide always within and here, no matter what arises or presents?
And so a couple of things I'd love to explore there. And one of them is the concept that was, or the term that was coined by Miriam Rose, and that is Dadirri. And maybe I haven't quite pronounced that right, but the concept of that deep listening, which I experience when I walk through the bush, and that deep listening and feeling and sensing into it. But there's also that deep listening of self too, isn't there?
That's right.
How does that shape your way through walking your right way for you, your art and bringing up your daughters and existing here in this world? How does that shape your way?
In my Kulin Nation language, we use the term Gupanewal, which is, as Auntie Miriam Rose shared, as Dadirri. And in that deep listening, again, it obviously incorporates the ears, but it incorporates all the senses. Einstein often referred to, we only use that 10% of our brain matter. That 90% or mass is interlinked with this deep listening. And it's realizing and accessing this understanding that we are the entire ocean within a drop. We're often informed and constantly bombarded with this, you are you, live for you, me and minesness. But when we realize this we and oursness and we walk tall with everything around us, we become a bit like a dolphin that sends out a sonar. And in that sonar, everything reflects back in this volumes of information, this inner well of knowing that is in constant relationship with its environment, internally and externally in constant symbiotic flow. So in this understanding with deep listening, for instance, mob living here for thousands of generations, this informed them when it was time to move, when it was time to settle, when it was time to hunt. You know, they had these relationships of the plants and the animals. That flower tells me that that fish has arrived now. That deep listening was informed through all of these seasonal indicators internally and externally, constantly in flow. And that's where things like colds and flus and disease were not a part of um, mob here, First Nations people, but I'm sure it was the holographic blueprint of all of us in this deep listening. There was no known suicide. There was no jails for rampant crime rates. There was no tooth decay. And you could say it was due to eating certain foods. Of course, that is part of it. But this deep listening allows everything to flow like a river. And this universal knowledge that flows through us cleans and nourishes and keeps us vibrant in life force. So in this deep listening, it's an acknowledgement that there is no beginning and there is no end. We're just part of this constant eternal stream. And in this, we're allowing ourselves to be continually nourished and informed and guided and supported, as well as add to this this inner knowing. In India, not to get off topic, but in India there was back in the 1930s, I believe, a story of this Indian man. These mathematicians will work out these complex mathematical equations, take them 20, sometimes 50 years to work out these complex, equations that related to universal theories and aspects. And this man in India that they found out about had no formal education, but he could work out such equations with relative ease. And this was due to that obviously well of knowledge that exists, like Einstein shared, and that 90% of that wealth, when mob would walk on country, that intuitively be guided what to eat, what was, available to support, where to go, all of that. And so a lot of Dadirri or Gupanewal is deep listening to remember who we truly are. We often, again, informed that we are this separate little entity, but who we really are on a deeper level is not to be understood in the mind, but we are a belonging like a fish to the water, a tree to a bird to the tree. And in that belonging, we continually remember that, we are part of this universal field of awareness that is infinite in its spaciousness. So, yeah.
Mm, beautiful. I'm so glad this is being recorded because I feel it's something to re-listen to, and it rekindles that for me, that awareness that comes through. And I love hearing Gupanewal. That's lovely. I've learned a new word. Thank you for sharing. And um, I was really touched when I started to learn about your use of seasonal indicators and your deep knowledge of that. And what it invited me to think about is where I live, noticing the seasonal indicators. And I was looking this morning at some wattle that started to burst open. And I was like, oh, is that a bit earlier than it normally is? And then I was like, I wonder what that's a seasonal indicator for. So the invitation to start being more aware and noticing what other things happen around that time, or what's it telling me, is, a beautiful invitation. And I think when I hear you talk about being part of this constant eternal stream, it reminds me of when I do go and work with corporates. I often travel to cities to work with them. And I do look around me a lot. And I often, partway through the workshop, will say, let's go outside. I see a park out the window. Let's have a walk and come back, or spend an hour and do some partner discussions while we're on a walk. Because I look around and I go, concrete windows, everything sharp angles, fluorescent light, air conditioned, temperature controlled, and metal cars and all of those things. And I'm thinking to myself, no wonder we get so disconnected from that stream, because everything around is boxing us in and holding a tightness and preventing us from being part of that natural flow.
Yes. And isn't it, nothing is outside of the ayang. That's the word we use for oneness. The buildings, the cars, the technology, the 5G, everything is all part of it. And is obviously to have a balance and a flow. So how beautiful it is for an invitation to go and walk or feel or acknowledge that, again, in this world, there is also this spaciousness of being outside and acknowledging that relationship with each other. It's almost like when we're young. Well, it is like for me, when we're born and we're, continually passed on from our parents, this roadmap, and this roadmap you can see as a piece of paper, or you could see it as on the phone or whatever. But this roadmap, we're told to focus on this. Don't look over there. Don't look at just focus on this roadmap. But the roadmap, as you get to know in life, is never and will never be the terrain. It is but an intellectual, interpreted, sterilized interpretation of the terrain. It doesn't have water. It doesn't have mountains. It has this intellectual understanding. So when you walk on the land, when you experience water, when you walk on the hills or experience the trees, these are the true reference points of living. So we're often given this roadmap and informed that if we work and we have these things and we have this life, that this means success, that we are someone. We find our sense of belonging, but it never lasts. We always realize that it leads to the next thing and the next thing. So to balance that with actually walking on the terrain, metaphorically and literally, actually reminds us that there's a deep nourishment that quenches that thirst, that tempers that thirst for, once I do that, I'll be okay. Once I get that, I'll be happy. That tempers that and balances that with this, I have arrived. This is it. Look at this sun on my face, or this wind in my... I remember. It's calling me more intimately than the breath to remember. Wow, how beautiful. Now, when I go back into that building, I'm much more productive. I'm much more joyous, and I can do this with that balance. Because often on the other side, we're informed we've got to throw it all away. And I think going back to living in the bush and living as our ancestors might be a transitional part of our, but in this time right now, it's not going to be a reality that would allow us to live in a way that is a transition for us. So that balance, like inviting them, people to come out and stand and walk and be outside, is such a beautiful way to do that. Wow.
And so, what that's bringing up for me is thinking about a lot of the people I work with are deeply stressed and are in that mode of, I've got to pay a mortgage, so both parents have to work, or whatever it looks like. And there's this sense of, I'm never quite getting there. And, once one thing happens, then another. So I'm interested in your reflection, because obviously, you've got two beautiful daughters. You have to eat and survive, and you have your art and all of that. But do you have any advice or thoughts for those who are going, I kind of want to step off a bit of that? And how do I gently ease into, or how do I find some of that sense of stillness that you're suggesting when I do feel like the world is just rushing around me?
Of course, I'm part of this human journey. So, life is messy, life is clunky, life is uncomfortable at times. And sometimes I think we deliberately forget so that we may remember and go, aha, there. But there's a continual dance with that. But something in my world that I find is there can be action without action inside, if that makes sense. There's a sense of rest and a sense of ease and a sense of flow. And in that, as I say, acknowledging that at times it feels clunky. At times it feels like you're just unable to walk with ease or flow. But in this understanding that often we create the ripples in our world and don't realize that we're the ones throwing the stones. And in saying that, we chop wood, carry water. We could all just lay down and do nothing to understand that we are the universal flow, and we could, but this is not our purpose. This is also to acknowledge that we're here as part of our duty, our life living and devotion is to responsibility for our children, for our body, our community. And so in that, I find for me, finding that sense of belonging inside, that sense of purpose. And again, this in this system or society that we live in, everything is leading us, continually bombarded to lead us to believe it's a linear thing. So it always means that there's a destination somewhere. But rather than that, it's more of an immersing into the moment, into that deep listening. And in an immersion, it just means cultivating awareness around, I am here, I have arrived, I am what I seek out there. It's okay to, have a project. It's okay to have a deadline. But when I define myself by that, I define my identity, it forever is someplace else that I may never get to. And someplace else could be 50 years down the track, 20 years. It could be next week. But what happens is that builds up that perpetual motion that once we get there, are we able to get off and go, or is that just another illusion that keeps us continually? Because we talked about earlier, there's obviously a narrative, and there's certain people or entities that create profit from us continually someplace else. When I have that tablet, or when I have that supplement, or when I build that body, or when I watch that show, or when I have that amount of money. But really, for me, I've come to realize in my life that I I will invite all of those, each of those things, but I realize that the only moment that is really real and will really ever provide that deep sense of rest is right now. And if I can allow that to be more and more now, then if those moments come that I have more money, if those moments come that I've provided all the safety for my children, everything, there's going to be more presence and more ability to be able to receive and be receptive and open up to that. My chop wood, carry water becomes a center more around this, as opposed to an insecure place of lack or of I need to do, or I need to be more, or I'll never ever have enough, and it, sometimes we're often injected that we need more, and sometimes we don't necessarily need more. But even if there is a yearning for more, the understanding is not to get rid of that. The understanding is to not define myself by that and go, I am enough. I am doing enough. And yes, I can continue to contribute, but more isn't going to make me better. More isn't going to make me more loved. More isn't going to provide more acceptance. Into which, there's this saying, which wolf do I feed? Do I feed the wolf of more contentment, of more peace? Because underneath $1 million, or underneath, doing something that provides an over there outcome, is a sense of relaxation and peace, which I believe is what we're all really seeking, and that belonging and acceptance. But if we wait for the world to provide that for us, it may never happen. And, for us to realize that it's up to us to do that, then it actually gives the power back to ourselves. And that, again, that true sense of sovereignty to go, I may be still working and doing whatever, but I'm not going to put more chains around my legs that burden me and make me feel like I'm trapped in life. And the magic thing is, what we're often informed is if we change the outer, a bit like ironing the surface of the ocean, it will inform the inner. But everything is interlinked. The more that we create that sense of stillness and belonging and acceptance internally, it tends to reconfigure our external world to reflect that, a bit like that dolphin and that sonar and deep listening and all of that. So yeah, that's how I endeavor to navigate my world and keep a deep relationship with this internal awareness and spaciousness, which we're often informed as woo-woo. That stuff is, that person's cheese has slid off their cracker. They're crazy. But, I infallibly am aware through what flows through this consciousness that there is something much greater than my physical and emotional and mental efforts pushing. Yeah.
And isn't it interesting how often we chase that dream, or we build and create and own more, and then we worry about, now I've got to take care of 2 cars and this place, and the more we own, the more then we're worried someone's going to steal it from me, or I've got to protect these things, and then I've got to insure everything. And so it does become this crazy fast wheel. And I can't agree more that pausing and creating space for reflection and celebration and that depth is something often that we recognize when we meet someone, like I was saying when I first met you, Jandamarra, and I felt my nervous system recalibrate. It was like, I can relax, because I could tell you didn't want anything from me. You weren't going to say, right, we've got to do this. Everything was an invitation. Yeah. So often we meet people who have come to some sense of that in themselves, and we yearn for that. And yet it's so easy, isn't it, to be distracted by the bright lights. We're getting programmed all the time to keep running that treadmill, keep the economy flowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we start to see, and the thing is, I say this knowing that I am part of the problem, but I'm also part of the solution.
Mm,
I live in this society and I'm aware I am contributing to some of these things, trying to lessen continually my footprint within it.
mm.
So we start to realize that all of us are, you know, going on this journey, doing our best. We don't need more and more judgment. We don't need more and more, you know, um, shame or blame or guilt. We need to, remind each other that we're holding each other's hand through this human journey and experience. And I don't mean in some airy-fairy way, which is beautiful too, running across the hills, but, really in the sense that we're heading in a direction seemingly that is killing all of us. It is destroying the very essence of living and crushing it, because it seems that a deliberate thing from when we're children is this economic treadmill that sees our value in doing. Like to lay under a tree, to take time is seen as laziness. What a deep, dark inversion that is, because, in laying under that tree, you're taking time to deeply rest. No, you must codral cold, you must soldier on. Don't take too much time off. Sorry, business. No, you got 2 days there. Get back to work, back into it. Sorry, business, for those that might not be aware, is when you lose someone in your life, and take time to be with that. Our body is a barometer for everything. So when we don't take time, it stores and keeps count, and it comes out as dis-ease. Dis-ease is discomfort in our energetic, physical, emotional, and psychic field. So no wonder cancer is not the problem. Suicide is not the problem. Incarcerations are not the problem. They are but symptoms telling us we're heading in a direction way far, and we're heading in a direction that is not deeply nourishing. So maybe laying under that tree for an hour or a couple of hours or a whole day is not being lazy, is not this inverted way that our value system is in what we do, that will never be enough,
Yeah.
because obviously it's profit driven, and also it's killing us. The coffee lines when I drive through
Yeah.
town are becoming bigger. And I understand, because people want to just get through their day for their families, for their duty in life, chop wood, carry water.
Mm,
But they're killing themselves to push, 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 push. And
mm,
is really, we must, really evaluate, is that true value and worth to us? Is this our true sense of belonging in
mm,
that concept? It's like a fish swimming further from water. Of course, it's going to show symptoms of distress and anxiety and, physical,
mm,
expression that tells it, hey, go back. Remember who you are. You belong to that water. That water belongs to you. Yeah. Funny. Funny, but kind of insane at the
It
same
is,
time.
isn't it? And it really reminds me of the yogic principle of ahimsa, which is do no harm. It's love all, honor all, heal all, including yourself. So it is that really starting to listen to yourself. And I run a program called the 10-degree shift, which is about small little shifts to come home to yourself and to recalibrate and start tuning into, as you're saying, our nervous systems and our bodies are giving us biofeedback all the time. And a lot
Yes.
of the program was developed based on how the blue zones are. So people who are original people in all sorts of different countries around the world, and how they have a sense of community and worth. They walk to the markets every day and buy fresh food. They don't have remote controls for everything. They stand up, pick up, get down, move, a bit like your chop would carry water. And what we're seeing is they're the healthiest regions in the world. They live to be centenarians, over 100, and they're happy. They're not decrepit in a nursing home, contained in a room like my own father is, and it breaks my heart to see him. And yet he's happy in his container. He feels safe there. But I see these other people around the world who are still grandparents mentoring their little grandkids, and they're still ploughing their own field and really engaged in life and eating wholesome foods, and they're living well. And so there's secrets are out there. We can see them.
Yes.
It's up to us to pick it up.
The life of convenience has seemingly robbed us of so much. It's designed to make our life easier, more comfortable. Maybe there is a level of comfort there, but I don't believe it's made our life easier. Now that we have we have less time for one another. It was designed or supposedly introduced to us as it will make your life more time to do these things that you want to, but it doesn't seem to. And if anything, the times when they used to wash their clothes by the river, who were they doing that with their community? And yes, they were washing, they were collecting firewood, they were collecting it together, they were sitting around a central light source, the fire. These things that are now, you can sit in another room and close the door, or the light switch has replaced the TV set, has replaced the fire. There's things that have taken us away from that centralization around relationship, around doing it together, and also the physicality that our bodies are naturally designed to move. And as you say, go down to the market, things that are fresh, grown in your area. Now we have trucks bringing, or ships and planes bringing grapes from America.
Yeah.
Does our body go, hey, hang on, I don't know if I recognize what this actually is?
Absolutely.
So things like this, that we're often, as part of that getting to somewhere and constant, is that you can have everything at your feet right now or at your hands. But
Amazon.
That's right.
Order it today and get it tomorrow.
Right here, but
yes.
My phone, I choose to have it on permanent silent, unless there's something I need to be aware of, like something with my daughters. But other than that, growing up in the 70s, it was on a wall. There was no answering machine. And if you weren't there, you were off and outside. This thing of needing to be, contacted wherever you are, even on the toilet. I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's obviously a bit of an imbalance where you can't take time outside of that, where you can't have spaces where it isn't always being attainable or being, taken by that aspect. Yeah.
It's interesting. We had my partner Michael's nephew stay with us a week or so ago, and he hadn't been sleeping that well and been staying up late at home, but he's on his device all the time and playing games with mates. And here he was in bed by like 8:30, 9 o'clock, because we don't have air conditioning or everything. So every day, every afternoon, we go for a walk and find wood to chop. We collect small kindling, and then Michael chainsaws up any trees that are felled to create our fire for the night. And we don't have telly. Our fire is our kind of central point. And so, his nephew, 14, was like yawning and like, oh, I've got to go to bed every night. And we were like, this is great, right? It's the wearing the body down in a way, but the contentment. And we played, rummy cub card games and board games, and he had the best time, and he didn't touch his phone. And it was beautiful, all of us just connecting. And so there's simple things that we can do.
That's right. And even things like the fire, the light of the fire, is a kind of red flame. The afternoon sun is a yellow light. You know, in our house here, the girls and I, we got deliberate lights of yellow and red to help those parts of us that are millions of years of relationship. That blue light stimulates and keeps us all heightened, which is TV or devices or even certain lighting. You know, and we even have, or I have on my bed, a grounding blanket, you know, and I enjoy we go out on country and enjoy to lay and walk barefoot and spend time. But again, balancing out that life with something like that, and how beautiful is an opportunity to play rummikub with the fire and together, again, remembering when it's a blackout, you know, maybe going once a week or maybe more. Let's have a blackout. Let's go together and just sit and enjoy things without it being, you know, this constant. Like, people look at the Amish who live a certain lifestyle and go, wow, they're doing it tough. But, you know, there seems to be a consensus that there's a level of nourishment and joy in doing these things that they do, washing still by hand and, you know, preparing food together, harvesting that food, growing that food, having that relationship. Wow, there's a lot to be thrown out in the life of convenience that, again, is constantly to get to somewhere. You know, convenience food, fast food, sure. We go out to restaurants, my girls and I, you know, and it's beautiful not to have to cook each and every night. But, you know, the time that we spend cooking is relationship with some of the herbs and the food that we pick from the garden, which is, you know, nourishing to know that not only it's healthy, but we've grown that.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And so coming back to your art, I'd love to kind of loop around there and hear a little bit more. Your artworks are absolutely incredible, and a lot of them, not just your murals, but your paintings as well, really large in size too, and deep in their connection. What inspires you, or where does that come from? Is it a thing that you go, I'm going to paint today, or is it just when it comes to you? Is it that you see something? I'd love to just know a bit of how does that spark of inspiration come through you?
Yeah, good question. In my earlier times, of my art career, if you like, or vocation, I worked two jobs. I worked at disability, I worked at landscaping. I did art therapy for 5 years, but I was constantly work and then coming home and painting. And I painted a painting for 8 years, one after the other, and never had any break. It was still, you know, settling in me, this thing of I must provide. I had very young children then, you know, I had babies. Well, the girl's mum had babies. I was there in absolute devotional support to ensure that she was here to nourish them and be present. And so I got to a point where I realized this is just so much effort, constantly living on 10 acres here, looking after that and everything else. And I realized there must be something easier. And so I came to a place where I jumped off that cliff, not knowing if I had wings. And my youngest one was only 2 years old. My oldest one was 4 at the time. So it was a real risk. But in jumping off that cliff, I'd not had, it seemed like everything has flowed much better. And getting back to your question or your invitation of answering to that, I now, I don't paint constantly one after the after the other. I kind of allow myself to be guided by signposts of where to be and what to do, and what definitely comes from a place of inspiration. Obviously, the inspiration of a lot of my pieces is about unification and walking together, and they have First Nation and non-First Nation subjects, or they'll have First Nation subjects that talk about universal principles of kinship, you know, relationship to country, belonging, identity, all of these things. So I don't get into the studio as much lately. I've been doing a lot more murals, which has called me to be out there. During the height of the pandemic time, I made choices, and my choices shut me out of a lot of galleries and places and things. Again, with inner sovereignty, I couldn't control those circumstances, so I lost a lot of employment, a lot of work, and a lot of things that put me for a very small time into a sense of, wow, I've got children. What do I do? What am I? And it guided me to be more doing murals. And what I've seen through doing the murals, doing the paintings in the studio, I have amazing exhibitions. It has allowed me amazing opportunities to connect with subjects, go out to communities and being part of ceremonies and all of these things that I use as reference for these images. But these murals, that a lot of what I'm doing lately, are connecting on a greater level, sometimes having, 750 co-collaborators to create these beautiful big
Wow,
visual artworks
it's
that speak
amazing.
about that flower and that animal. You know, that fruit tells us it's time to start creating possum skin cloaks. All of these things that they have direct sovereignty and relationship to understand themselves.
Mm.
And so I can see how naturally it informs and guides me to where I'm to be. So yes, my pieces, my paintings, some of them have been in the Archibald, in all major art prizes, and that is something that I believe is not a part of my journey now. I'm kind of, I think, as I'm heading headlong into my older stages of life, my whole focus has been really shifted to how do I lay more of this foundation for the next seven generations? How do I
Mm.
invite young people? So even when I go and be part of in juvenile facilities now and work with some of those young people in there that have been cast out of society because they're not conforming, but to see that they're going, I'm alive. I'm not dead inside, which they show in so-called unhealthy ways, to allow them through paint, through having their voice seen and heard, through creating murals within those institutions, or whether it's at schools or in the community. And for me, again, it's about walking together. It's about realizing that, yes, we're all beautifully made different. Color, hair, sex, sexual orientation, whatever it be, but we're all same. And these universal principles are something to be celebrated. So for me, a lot of my art and the journey that I'm on is very much informed by those aspects, and also, again, where it heads and how it's evolved.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I love that concept of the unification and walking together. There's like about 100 things. I know we don't have all day because I'm like, oh, I want to ask all of these things. Um, and that journey that you're on in moving into eldership and more of how do you give forward those 7 generations and the value of that. And um, I think the gift of allowing people to explore their creativity without boundaries. And I had the opportunity with you on country to experience that. And what a delight that was. And one of the beautiful things around that is Michael, my partner, who is an artist and more of a digital artist, has just enrolled in art therapy to become an art therapist because it so inspired him, that connection between our own emotion and our psychology as well. And I love you were sharing with me before we were recording around doing that recently with a group, and how one man's expression, I think, took some people off center when they're people, we're all used to these rules. So do you mind sharing a bit of
Ah,
what occurred with that?
yes, absolutely. I did art therapy, as I mentioned, for 5 years, and it was with the elderly and disadvantaged, those with physical and emotional and mental so-called disabilities. And in this, it was like a hot knife through butter. It reached in to allow them, their medication went down, their mental neuroses, the physical ailments were better marketably over that 5-year period, just through doing these creative endeavors together. So one exercise that was done amongst many was called musical canvas, where you start with your original canvas, and the intention could be to create something that brings you joy in your world, and you'll start to create it. And as the music stops, rather than you getting up and moving to the seat next to you, you pass your canvas to the next person. We would often have 25 people that would engage in this one circle. So it would take us, over around 2 hours to get around to each other. And so as it would move around, everybody would add or complement with their part of this piece. They can look at whose piece it was and go, oh, and add to, or they can just, add to it. But when it got around to this one person, Jeffrey was his name, he had a roller and black paint, and he would just roll over every single piece that came past him. I think there was 2 before him that got past before he realized the black roller was where he wanted to be. And they were going, Jandamarra, you have to ask him to stop. I said, this is the process. If I ask him to stop, it's undoing what this is actually about, which is self-expression.
Yeah, and judging, right?
Absolutely. So they were now like, do we do all these pretty things or anything to add to these pieces, because they're just going to be black rolled? I said, it's up to you. You have the invitation to give your heart and soul to something, even knowing that it's going to reach that point. But what had happened, except for those original 2, is that when the piece got around, when the pieces went around, people started to realize that when they scratched back into the black with a palette knife or a stick or something, it was revealing these amazing, colorful pieces underneath the black. And what that was literally and symbolically representative of how depression or moments of sadness or moments that we perceive. I mean, depressed is often a calling for deep rest. But these moments that we experience is an invitation to something that can reveal the extent of the light and color within us. And so even though he was loving it, he took no note of everyone going, oh my God, oh no. I go, Jeffrey, it's okay. And I go, everyone else, it's okay.
Yeah.
They were like, when they got their piece back, they were so, each and every one of those ones that were concerned were like, wow, this is amazing. So it really, that the beauty of such organic, I say organically orchestrated, because you are orchestrating something, but the organicness is left there to take over and inform and orchestrate how it unfolds. And how beautiful that was. It was supporting Jeffrey as well as everyone else and going, it all works out.
Yeah, and learning to be flexible with it. It reminds me also of one of the women I've walked country with, spent some time in Central Australia. And she was saying a lot of the Aboriginal women there who were doing amazing artworks. She said they would paint a whole image and then they would paint over it with
Yes.
something else. And she said their medicine and some of their Dreamtime stories and some of the magic in it was in that painting underneath. And then
Yes.
they would paint the painting that I guess tourists or other people wanted to see, but the magic was
Yes.
sometimes hidden beneath. just like under Jeffrey's black paint, right? The real story is there.
And with everything, you know, like you could look at Aboriginal culture and go, ochre, clapsticks, dancing, story, ceremony, you know, intentional. But all of this is what you see with the eyes. The invitation is something that transcends that. And when you connect with that language that is the deeper undercurrent of the ocean of living, you start to see that a friendship isn't just a friendship. You know, a song isn't just a song. You know, ochre isn't just ochre. It all becomes a sacred invitation to this expansiveness. And so even with art or painting or something, it always transcends those elements. It transcends, you know, the person who's standing at the front orchestrating it, because they're as much the student and as part of it, this organic unfolding where no one's truly in control, but there's this whole beautiful unfolding happening. And you get to see that everything, every moment is an invitation. And children are such great wisdom keepers for this. Remember, this flower is most important right now. That meeting, Papa, that you've got to go to, it's okay. You'll get there. But this
Yeah.
flower right now, look at it. Oh, how sweet is that? All right, let's go. Come on.
Yeah. Beautiful. I want to ask your permission first. I have a beautiful print of yours here. Is it
Yes,
okay if I hold that up? Is
absolutely.
that all right with you? Because I want to kind of, I guess, get you to share some of your interpretation of this, um, which is magical. Look at this, because it was your explanation of the blue and the yellow and the color that really helped me feel into more of this depth. So do you want to explain a little of the inspiration of this beautiful girl?
So this beautiful image, the image that I referenced from was from a beautiful friend, Renee Barlou. I endeavor 98% of all my paintings are reference from images that I've, you know, gone and spent time. And I have met Tamika. I have met her mum. But this image was from my friend Renee Barlou, who works as weaving out with traditional custodians up in Arnhem Land. And this young girl, as you can see, the blue and the orange and the red, this is a mapping of country within her face, the sunset on the water. The reason for this is an invitation into a spaciousness to understand everything in that piece is a dot within a dot. And for Aboriginal people, when they use dots, they're looking at a typographical perspective, a mapping of country like a sacred text. They're reading land and country as they're reading their own identity. So with the land and the water like that, for eons, they've been having relationship with that country. If you sever that relationship like the fish to water, we become a walking dead. And in that, there is nothing to be put on that canvas. It would be blank and empty. It would be sterilized to the point where nothing would exist. So every dot, every intention of creating that dot is to show that relationship is the full richness of who we are. Not only what's been here for thousands of generations, over 2,000 generations, but is every holographic blueprint of all of us in relationship to these significant reference points, country, our spirit, our kinship, our relationship to the animals, to the trees, to the dirt, to everything in existence. So as you can see, you could look at that and go, that's a pretty piece, and that's a beautiful, stunning young smile of innocence. But again, it's an invitation into a much more awareness that sits beyond that, like the ceremonies. You know, some could go, beautiful dancers. Ah, great Aborigine. Come back next year and we'll do it again next NAIDOC. You know, and I'm not impoverishing people that do
No.
that. They can tend to miss the whole language of what's going on and what's invited in a universal aspect for all of us. you know, to come back home to ourselves more intimately than the breath, and remember and go, wow. I talked about, if I may just share, like those seasonal indicators, that flower, that animal. Right now we have the wattle in full bloom, and this tells us that the tailorfish have arrived on the coast in Cubby Cubby country. My dear sister Brianna Hansen, who is Cubby Cubby, beautiful sister, shared this story with me that when that wattle is in full bloom, it looks like a row of eggs. So it tells you not to go fishing for that fish, because you are taking from 7 generations ahead, and it can take that long to rebalance that undoing. But if you wait for that flower to fall off that tree, start to crumble and get old, it tells you that they've had the fish. So no longer that tree looks like it's got a big, you know, fish rows all over it. And how beautiful is that? Because that does not only benefit mob here, that benefits all people. And we have, you know, a documented 570 something different nations. Can be like Italy and Spain and France and Germany, and, you know, in that distant, different cultural ways, different practices, different ceremonies, different songs that all relate to a different relationship to country and land. So in that, in certain areas, that flower means something different in relationship. But how beautiful it is when you know that, so that you're paying it forward to your your grand, great, 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 great grandchildren, and going, planting seeds for trees that we may never sit under to, you know, enjoy that shade, is really what living is about, and supporting that rather than the take, take, take. So how beautiful that story of Tamika and connection and relationship is an invitation, as with, you know, all the things that are reached out, still offering, come walk together and understand your belonging, because it doesn't matter where you come from. You know, we're often working our lives away, blood, sweat, and tears for this piece of land. But the reality is, it's our birthright. We're all tribal people. We're all indigenous to this continent. And our birthright is to walk in freedom and walk like every other animal, in understanding that we belong, as opposed to defining ourselves by this sense of ownership. Yeah.
So deeply moving and touching. And without being too indulgent, I just want to share with you that after receiving that amazing, beautiful gift, I have an investment property that had changed over tenants, and it needed quite a bit of upkeep and renovation. And Michael and I have been doing that. And the tenants that are going to go in are Aboriginal family, beautiful family, 4 children. And the mother, her name is Tamika. And so I was like, oh, it's called in a Tamika. It's so interesting. And they're so
Nice.
excited about their new house, and she's just had a brand new baby. And so getting in the flow and getting ready to move in and settle down in their own little nest again. And yeah, it was just
Amazing.
amazing timing.
Amazing.
Amazing timing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap up, and I'm sure anyone who's listening is like, no, like we want to keep listening to Jandamarra. Um, I would like to just invite Jandamarra Cadd. I know you've got honorary doctorates. You are very well known in the art world. But for those who have never met you before and they want to go and check out some of your work, or just exchange, or you be in your presence a bit more, how can they find you, or where would they find you?
On social media, I have an account on Instagram and Facebook, Jandamarra's Art, JANDAMARRA and ART. And I don't have a website at the moment. It got beautifully hacked a couple of years ago, and
Oh,
I haven't brought it back up. So I haven't had a lot of prints available or things. But, it will come back into flow when it does. But so that's the best way to reach me, or reach out if you wish to, or see certain artworks, or expressions of art and murals, and
Beautiful.
on Facebook, Jandamarra's art is a beautiful one to keep updated with things. So
Beautiful. So go and find him there if you're curious to know more. I think just in rounding out, I really want to express my gratitude. I've been on a path of following this guidance, of moving in consciousness, and we're always in flow and flux, and there's no superior or inferior, but becoming more aware of being less in those contractive spaces and consciousness, and moving more into awareness and choice. And I think, and what I feel is, you really round out empowerment, adding value and supporting others to gain freedom just through your words and your voice and your being. Your real demonstration of take only what you need, not what you greed. And that's been taught to me through elders. Uncle Bill in Sky Country taught me that very early on, and was always talking about all of us walking together, and that we're all sovereign of Earth and this mother. But I really, I just want to honor how you voluntarily serve the greatest good. And I want to honor your ancestry, what comes through you, and your humility, because it truly is a breath of fresh air. It makes me quite emotional saying so, because the brief moments and the few times we've met and spent time together around the fire have deeply touched me and my family and the people who visit here and want to come home to themselves. So I just want to express my deepest gratitude to you and all those who come through you.
Thank you. And mutually, meeting yourself and spending time on the land that you are custodian to, or steward to, and tend to, and support and have a relationship with. I felt deeply at ease and at rest and looked after and supported in, being my true self there and sharing that with others who were part of that beautiful weekend. I get to a stage in my life now where I can be with anybody, and I can sit even if I don't agree. I don't need to make people my enemy, or try and make them see that this is the way, because I'm not the center of anything. It's all within us. But I choose to spend my time with those that choose to walk with an awareness that we are far more than just me and mindness. So to meet people like yourself and share, time and space is a nice little illusion, but share that time and space, which can feel sometimes like a lifetime, and then other times it can feel like it just went so quickly. Is for me deeply nourishing, and I realize that it reflects a part of me that is deeply healing more and more as we all hold each other's hands in taking those steps forward, walking into the fire with our eyes wide open, allowing it to burn away the things that hold us back from, living a much more healthier, abundant, life-infused existence. So thank you, my beautiful friend.
Thank you. Yes, 5 days, it felt like an eon.
Yes.
I think appropriate to end is your beautiful saying of Yahweh, your way, my way, our way, Yahweh. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Yahweh.
Yahweh.